Nick's Riddle. Nick is quick. He solves riddles in no time. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Nick knows. Nick always wears grey in an attempt to merge in with the crowd. He always has at least £5.26 in his left trouser pocket. If he has any less than that, he gets anxious. In his right trouser pocket, he has $1.50. Because Nick is good at riddles, he notices that he hates change and loves change at the same time. If the amount of change in his pockets changes, he is in trouble. At school, Nick's class is reading Alice in Wonderland. That's how he knows the riddle about the raven and the writing desk. But reading is not Nick's strong point. For some reason, the print blurs and jumps before he can grasp the sense of it. Nicholas, please read out loud from the top of page 23. Nick is jolted out of his thoughts. He's been thinking about his guinea pig and why it reminds him of his Auntie Janet. Slowly, he realizes that Miss Peters is frowning and tapping her foot, and the class is starting to snigger. They know that when Nick begins to read, they are in for a tedious 10 minutes. He gets the words wrong and gradually turns ketchup red. Most of the children find this funny, but Nick doesn't, and nor does Minnie, who squirms in her seat and has to let her hair fall over her face. Annoyingly, her face turns red in unison with Nick's, and she can't bear anybody to see it. When Nick gets home after school, his mother is just slamming down the phone. She rushes out of the door. "I've got to go. It's your Auntie Janet." Nick looks at the shut front door. Thinking anxiously of Auntie Janet and wondering where his tea might come from if his mum isn't there, his feet lead him out into the back garden. There he sees his guinea pig snuffling into the straw at one end of the wooden run. As Nick approaches, the guinea pig waddles over to poke his nose through the wire. Nick is amazed at how trusting the animal is. The garden birds fly up and away when Nick opens the back door, but the guinea pig assumes that Nick is his friend. Thinking of friends, Nick feels sad. After a Dad and Nick dinner, which means burnt cheese on toast, Nick thinks about asking his dad if he knows why a raven is like a writing desk, or why guinea pigs are trusting and birds aren't. But Dad is whispering into his phone in a way that Nick finds unsettling. It seems as though something is wrong. But then his dad slides his phone into his pocket and smiles unconvincingly at Nick. "So let's have a look at your homework, shall we?" Nick knows Dad is trying to be helpful, but he doesn't seem to understand how difficult it is to read the chapter he's been set for homework. He's supposed to be finding out about a famous scientist and then telling the rest of the class about it. Nick likes science, but he doesn't like telling the class anything. It's hard to feel motivated when it means having to go red in front of everyone. And he knows it will be impossible to remember what he wants to say. Dad sneaks his phone out of his pocket to look at it. Nick sighs and pushes back his chair. He needs to go and see his guinea pig. Looking up from his phone, Nick's dad realizes that his son has disappeared. He can hear an odd noise. Gradually, he recognizes the sound as human, and it's coming from outside. Nick is crouched over in the garden and howling. Dad has never seen Nick cry before. In fact, he's barely seen him show any emotion. For a moment, Dad stands and stares helplessly, not knowing what to do. Then suddenly, he strides over and wraps his arms tightly around Nick's shoulders. in a way that he hasn't done for years. The pair stay like that for a long time, surveying the guinea pig lifeless on the grass. The next morning, Dad is whistling while he makes an attempt at breakfast. Mum still hasn't come home, but Dad has stopped fidgeting with his phone. Even though Nick and Dad have barely spoken, still barely spoken, there is an unusually comfortable feeling between them. Dad pats him encouragingly on the back as Nick checks the change in his pockets. It's all in order, but that is no guarantee that his presentation on Albert Einstein will go smoothly. Nick can't believe it. The kids in the class are clapping and cheering instead of their usual laughing and jeering. For once, he has been able to speak clearly with nearly all the words in the right order. His investigation into the theory of relativity made no sense to him at first, but slowly he began to piece something together. More importantly, he began to understand something about Albert Einstein. When Einstein was young, he didn't talk much, couldn't read easily, and couldn't remember names or poems he was supposed to learn. People now thought that Einstein, one of the cleverest people ever, was probably dyslexic and might have had Asperger's syndrome. Einstein behaved a bit oddly, but only to people who thought they didn't behave oddly themselves. It's all relative. Nick seemed a bit odd to other people too, but if you compared him to people with Asperger's, he was pretty normal. This seemed to Nick to be a kind of theory of relativity. Actually, Lewis Carroll might have been autistic as well. And perhaps that was why Nick knew why a raven was like a writing desk and other people didn't. After Nick's talk, his classmates seemed to see him with a new respect. Although they didn't go out of their way to make friends with him, they didn't laugh at him either. Mum returned home, but with Auntie Janet, who came to stay for a few weeks to recover from her operation. She and Nick spent hours discussing Nick's own theories of relativity. Dad realized, relative to his business worries, Nick's problems were more important. Together, Mum, Dad, and Auntie Janet helped Nick to see he was, indeed, quick. Nick had never brought anyone home after school. Never. But Mum and Dad tried not to look surprised when a girl appeared nervously at Nick's side. They could barely see her face through the curtain of her hair, but they were touched to see Nick very gently lean across and tuck her hair behind one of her ears. She looked up and managed a faint smile as Nick said, "This is Minnie, my friend."